When you have nothing, people disappear. The phone stops ringing. The invitations end. The promises quietly fade away. One by one. Until you cannot even remember who made them in the first place. And suddenly, the world becomes very, very quiet. At first, that silence feels like punishment. It feels like proof that you were never truly valued. It feels like evidence that you were always alone, and everyone else was simply too polite to say it. But if you stay in that silence long enough, something strange begins to happen. The silence stops hurting you, and it starts teaching you. Here are 7 brutal truths you only learn when you are left with absolutely nothing. And by the end of this, you will understand why are the people who lost everything often become the strongest people alive.
Welcome to True Stoic Journal, the path to inner control.
The first truth is this: loneliness becomes your teacher. At first, you fear being alone. You reach for your phone constantly. You search desperately for distraction. You wait by the door for someone, anyone, to walk back in. Then, slowly, painfully, something changes. You stop waiting for someone to save you. Epictetus spent years of his life in actual chains, owned by another human being, with no control over his own body. And yet he wrote that no one can control you without your consent. Think about the audacity of that statement, coming from a man who had every reason to believe the opposite. He understood something that most people never test in their entire lives, because most people are never forced into the kind of silence that reveals it. Solitude stops being a punishment. The moment you stop resisting it, it becomes the place where your actual strength is built. Not in the crowd. Not in the noise of constant company. Not in the applause of people who may not even remember your name next year. In the quiet room, where no one is watching, where you still choose to stand up anyway. That is where character is actually forged. Not performed. Forged. The second truth is this: you discover self-reliance. The less you expect from other people, the more you begin to discover what you are genuinely capable of. Depending on everyone around you creates constant, low-grade disappointment. Because people are unpredictable. They carry their own struggles, their own fears, their own limits, their own reasons for disappearing the moment things get difficult. This is not cynicism. This is simply human nature. And the Stoics understood it without bitterness. But learning to depend on yourself creates something far more valuable than any relationship ever could. Freedom. Marcus Aurelius, the most powerful man in the entire known world at the time, wrote in his private journal that very little is needed to make a happy life, because it is all within yourself, in your own way of thinking. He did not write that from a place of comfort. He wrote it while burying his own children, while managing a plague that was killing millions, while being betrayed by people he trusted completely. When you are left alone, you are forced to test that idea in the most direct, unavoidable way possible. And most people discover, often for the very first time in their lives, that they were far stronger than they ever gave themselves credit for. The third truth is this: pain becomes your greatest mentor. Nobody can carry your suffering for you. Nobody can fight your battles on your behalf. no matter how much they love you. But every difficult season leaves you stronger than comfort ever could. Seneca wrote that difficulties strengthen the mind the same way that physical labor strengthens the body. Steel is never made without fire. It is heated until it nearly breaks. Hammered relentlessly. Shaped under pressure that would destroy anything weaker. The lonely nights. The seasons where absolutely no one showed up. The silence that followed after everyone finally left. These were never punishments. They were the fire. And you were being shaped by it. Whether you realized it in the moment or not. The fourth truth is this. Silence reveals who is actually real. When you finally stop chasing people, watch very closely. Who chooses to stay? Some relationships only exist while they remain convenient. While you have something to offer. While your life looks easy from the outside. While being near you costs them nothing at all. But the people who remain during your hardest days, during the silence, during the seasons, when you had nothing left to give, those are the only people who deserve your best years going for war. The Stoics understood something profound here. Adversity does not create character in the people around you. It simply reveals the character that was already there, hidden beneath convenience. The fifth truth is this. You stop chasing people. Respect cannot be begged for. Loyalty cannot be forced, no matter how hard you try. If someone only values you when your life is easy, they were never actually walking beside you. They were simply walking where it happened to benefit them. Epictetus taught what is now called the dichotomy of control. You cannot control whether someone chooses to value you. You cannot control whether they stay or leave. But you can absolutely control whether you keep chasing people who have already shown you clearly and repeatedly exactly who they are. The moment you finally stop chasing, something remarkable happens inside you. You reclaim all the energy you were spending trying to convince people to see your worth. And you begin redirecting that same energy back toward yourself, toward building, toward healing, toward becoming. The sixth truth is this. Struggle becomes your fuel. Every rejection, every failure, every single lonely night becomes another reason to keep building anyway. The people who eventually rise the highest often began with nothing at all, except raw, stubborn determination. Marcus Aurelius faced war, plague, and betrayal simultaneously, and still wrote that the impediment to action advances action. That's what stands directly in your way becomes the way forward. This is not poetic exaggeration meant to sound inspiring on a screen. It is a practical, tested observation about how human beings actually grow under real pressure. Comfort rarely produces transformation. Struggle, faced honestly and repeatedly, almost always does. The seventh and final truth is this. You learn to grow without applause, without recognition, without validation from anyone at all. Because the strongest kind of confidence is built precisely when nobody is watching you. And the people who learn to build in complete silence rarely need to prove anything to anyone later. Their work speaks for them long after the words would have been forgotten. Zeno of Citium taught That well-being is achieved. Little by little. Through small, consistent, unglamorous actions. Not through dramatic public moments. That anyone will remember. The version of you that gets built in solitude. Without anyone cheering you on. Without anyone even knowing. What you are carrying is almost always the strongest version of you that will ever exist. And here comes the most important part of everything we have just walked through together. One day, the same silence that once made you feel abandoned becomes the same silence that protects your peace. Because when you have finally learned to stand completely alone, no absence can break you anymore. No rejection can define who you are. No single person's opinion can control your inner state ever again. The greatest strength was never having everyone beside you. It was always simply knowing you would be alright. Even if nobody ever stayed. If this reached something inside you today, share it immediately with someone who is sitting in silence right now, wondering if they will actually make it through this season. Like this video. Because this kind of truth deserves to reach every single person who needs to hear it tonight. And subscribe to True Stoic Journal. Because what comes next goes even deeper into building a life that no longer depends on anyone else's presence to feel whole. And it will be waiting in your feed very soon. Remember this. The silence that once felt like abandonment was never actually abandonment at all. It was preparation. You were never truly alone. You were simply being introduced for the very first time in your life to the person you would eventually become when no one else was left for you to lean on.